So the Jet Benny Show, copyright on the movie says 1985. I believe it came out on VHS in 1986. Directed by Roger Evans. It's one of those early to mid 80s Star Wars, John Carter of Mars, sci-fi fantasy, swashbuckling space opera type of little, low budget Super 8 features. But it stars this guy who looks like Jack Benny. So basically, it's this guy, Jet Benny, in the film, and we see at the very beginning of the film is this black and white, like, beginning of the Jack Benny Show. Jack Benny was an early TV and film star, and he had this television show, this variety show. And so the beginning of the movie is like the variety show, and then we go into, and that's shot in black and white Super 8, and then we go into the real film, which is this guy, this swashbuckling guy who looks like an old 50s, 60s television star. This guy, Jet Benny, who crash lands his ship, the Maxwell, on this desolate planet and gets into adventures. He has this weird robot companion, Rochester, and he's always yelling to Rochester, and he's always doing the Jack Benny, or is it this one? And he gets into adventures, does the usual Star Wars, John Carter of Mars stuff, saves a princess, saves the land, rescues the princess's brother, saves the land, saves the city of Altamira from being stormed by the evil leader Zane. And so it's kind of, like a swashbuckling, as I said, kind of a little bit of Star Wars, a little bit of John Carter of Mars, a little bit of Indiana Jones. It has a lot of special effects done by the director, Roger Evans. There's these little speed cycles that people go on, or they just they're like hover things. They're like hover segways. And there's a lot of ridiculous special effects. There's a lot of really good special effects. I mean, this film is kind of legendary. It's kind of been forgotten, but it was a feature film shot on Super 8, and that was really, in the 90s and the early 2000s, that was really impressive, and that really is what I looked up to when I made my feature film on Super 8, Frankenstein's Bloody Nightmare. I looked up to these movies like Jet Benny, and Jet Benny really usually Super 8 feature films like Darkness or Necromantic or that type of thing. Super 8 feature films usually go for a very grungy Super 8 look. They go for, they're very, and sometimes they're remastered in HD in recent years and they look a bit better. But Jet Benny looks really good. It looks like it was shot on 16 millimeter. It has a very professional, good look. It just looks great. And I think the story goes is that they actually thought about shooting on 16 millimeter, but they thought that Super 8, or Roger Evans thought that Super 8 would give it a more kind of vintage look. They shot on Kodachrome and then actually made prints. They made an actual film print of the film in Kodachrome. And then later on, I think they actually did blow it up to 16 millimeter to do the video transfer. Because apparently at that point in the mid-80s, it was very difficult to do video at actual telecine transfer with Super 8. Usually the Super 8 transfers in that day were, off the, just shooting a video camera off a Super 8 screen. And so and the effects in this film, they're kind of intentionally cheap, and there's a lot of the 2001 style effects, which are like, not necessarily miniatures, but like cutouts of miniatures that you animate you know, like in a you'll have a star field, and then you'll have like a picture of a ship, and you'll animate it, and you'll just move that, like that picture around. Instead of photographing the model, it's like you just put the picture on and you just move around. Dark Star did a similar animation, and it goes all the way back to 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is really kind of like the godfather of doing that stuff really good. And so, but then Star Wars did it with actual miniatures and doing photography like that. But films like Jet Benny are kind of going back to the 2001 way of doing it. And it looks really impressive, actually. I mean, again, what they were able to accomplish is there was a lot of Super 8 filmmakers who were accomplishing a lot, but I think what Roger Evans did with this film was really, it really holds up. It really holds up to this day, and it really looks good. And the special effects are good, and the movie, I think it's just a funny little movie, even if you don't really have a big idea of who Jack Benny was, and I really honestly don't. But I mean, you know the kind of if you even have a vague idea of the mannerisms, or it's just a funny, you know, as I said, if you're a fan of Star Wars or John Carter, you know all the kind of the character beats and everything. And if you're into that kind of era of early 80s, mid 80s, like Super 8, low budget filmmaking, you know, just that homemade type filmmaking, YouTube before YouTube really existed. You know, that first era of filmmakers using these homemade optical effects. You know, everything was hard. It was optical. You had to, you know, go through these things in photochemical, optical, and film. And, you know, even though it was a little tiny Super 8 film, it was still film, you know, and everything was hard, and you had to read magazines and books to get this information, you know. And everything was, as I say, really difficult. And it's kind of been a lost era of filmmaking. It really is. There's so many hundreds, thousands of beautiful short films, and then there were dozens and dozens of films, feature films like Jet Benny, which have just kind of gone by the wayside, have been kind of forgotten. But I think Jet Benny is one of the more impressive ones. It really is, you know, a really, you know, as far as the whole performances, the guy who plays Jack Benny, you know, I mean, it really is an interesting film. Roger Evans, the story goes, he went to this distribution company, United Video, United Home Entertainment. They eventually became VCI. They're out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the story goes that he just camped out there. He actually flew in. He camped out at you know, their offices. They eventually let him in, and he showed the movie on Super 8. He showed a print of it. You know, he brought a projector. He showed it on a wall in an office, and they made a deal with him to put out Jet Benny on VHS, and then he got a deal to actually direct another movie called Forever Evil, which became a staple of home video and USA Network. It burned itself into my mind, and that's really how I learned about Jet Benny, because I read about Forever Evil. And then Jet Benny kind of came into it. But Jet Benny has been really difficult to watch over the years. It was released on VHS, and the VHS is kind of, it's a dime store VHS. It's not that difficult to find. But it's still not that easy either. It's still one of those kind of films that are just, it's like it has no real audience. It has no real cult. It's one of those cult films searching for a cult. So for many years, it was kind of like Forever Evil was easier to see than the Jet Benny show. And now someone somewhere has put Jet Benny, they've just shortened it from the Jet Benny show to just simply Jet Benny. It's now currently on Amazon streaming, and it's available for free with Amazon Prime, which is incredible. The copy that's on Amazon Prime looks good. It looks remastered. I don't know if Roger Evans had anything to do with this new version, but it looks a lot better because it's been on YouTube. A copy of the VHS has been on YouTube, and that actually doesn't look that bad. But this version looks way, way better. It just looks wonderful. And and it's just it's great. It's great to watch and check it out. I mean, they did shorten the title, even though in the actual film it still says The Jet Benny Show. That was always kind of confusing to me because the Jet Benny Show, you're wondering, okay, is this like a TV show? Is it like the movie? It's just a movie. You know, they call it The Jet Benny Show because it was the Jack Benny Show, so they did it. You know. The story again, there's not a lot of information about it online. The story goes is that the director was working at this theater in Houston, Texas, and there was just this guy who looked a lot like Jack Benny. And he just got together with the theater people and put together this movie just all around this guy who resembled Jack Benny, and he envisioned, okay, what if Jack Benny was alive and working in the late 70s and early 80s when the Star Wars phenomenons came about, and what if he did a knockoff Star Wars movie? And so that's where the idea for the Jet Benny Show began. But I would love to see, as far as I know, I don't think this movie's ever been released on DVD. You know, it would be great to have this thing out on DVD with all kinds of extras and so forth. Or maybe, I don't know who would be interested. I would be interested in it. You know, there's a whole slew of those Super 8 films which are really good, which are just waiting to be kind of discovered. Super 8 and 16 millimeter, though that's that era of filmmaking, which I hate to say it's amateur filmmaking because some of it looks quite professional and quite good because it was all shot on film and everything was like, you know, it's hard to do. There was some amateur looking stuff, but there are also some very accomplished, technical, really good-looking stuff that you really, even with shot in Super 8, you really can't tell something. You can't really tell the difference between 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter. It was just so good-looking, some of this stuff. And so many people, so many young people dedicated to making these movies. It seems a shame that those years have been washed away like tears in rain, but who knows? Maybe they'll come back, and it's great that Jet Benny is now available on streaming, and a lot of these are available on streaming and through Prime and on YouTube, so it's coming back. They're coming back. They're coming back for more.